Welcome to the Dynasty Pros Combine Recap Show. I'm your host, Nick Young, and I'm joined by fellow Dynasty Pros contributor Dustin Ledke. Dustin, great to have you on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's great to get on, talk Combine. I was down in Indy Friday, Saturday, and half of Sunday, so it's good to talk about some of the stuff we saw down there because it was quite the exciting time.
Awesome, man. Well, before we get started talking about your risers and your fallers in terms of players, I just got to ask, what was the experience like?
It was super cool to I think the press conferences were cooler than me. I've always watched the Combine. It was different being the person, but getting to do a press conference and getting to talk to these young men and find a little bit more about them as people, kind of see their personality a little bit come through, was really interesting. And then get to connect with a bunch of other just people doing this in the industry. So whether that's, guys from Dynasty Nerds or DLF or radio host, I talked to Michael Smith from ESPN for about 15, 20 minutes about Dynasty, and he had just got done doing an interview with Bijan Robinson. So we just talked and realizing that those big name guys like Michael Smith, who's a big name in the industry, was just there on the floor, went up and said, hi, hey, I'm a big fan. And we talked Dynasty. He's just a normal person, and realizing that I've been doing this for 2.5 years. He's been doing it for 15, but there's not a lot of difference between it. It's just reach and experience, but he wasn't big timing me. Wasn't oh yeah, I'm a big deal. He was just yeah, let's talk. And we talked. I have a 101 in one of my Dynasty leagues, and he was telling me, give me some advice, what do you think I should do? And we just talked like we were two normal people. You would never know that he's this big TV personality. So that was really fun. And then obviously watching some of those Combine experiences was super cool. The buzz in the room was pretty electric for some of it.
Since you brought up the 101, I got to ask, with our article coming out saying if you have the 101, Bijan's not going to be the answer, what do you can do if you have any 101s?
If you have the 101, I think you should try to trade down because people might fall in love with Bijan. So I'm in a tough situation where I have 101. My running backs are Dameon Pierce, Javonte Williams, A.J. Dillon, Miles Sanders, Tyler Algier. So I'm decent. My quarterbacks, and this is a super flex league, I have Mac Jones, Desmond Ridder, Jordan Love. And that's it.
That's a rough one.
So I would love to trade back to 103, 104, get a quarterback, and pick up some extra picks. Now talking to Michael Smith, he said draft Bijan at 101, and I have a bunch of second round picks. He's like, hey, trade back up and get Hendon Hooker. He seemed really high on him. I think you can make the argument that a quarterback should go at 101. I think it should be C.J. Stroud. If you're going to take a quarterback there, I think he has the most out of three out of Stroud, Young, and Richardson. I think Richardson has the most bust potential just because of his lack of experience and his lack of college production. And then Young, small, who knows what that could be. But obviously landing spots matters. But I think Stroud's the best passer in the group. I think you can make the argument. I wouldn't fault anybody for taking Bijan at all because I think he's going to be a really good running back. But I think it's hard right now because we just don't know where they're going to be. If Bijan goes to Buffalo, I like it. I don't love it. If Bijan goes to Miami, I love it because they have no one else, right? Bijan should be a generational talent. But we just don't know.
I agree with you. And on the C.J. Stroud thing, I agree completely. In my opinion, he's my favorite quarterback in the draft. I love Bryce Young out of Alabama. He's great. Don't get me wrong. But Stroud, just watching him at the Combine, he was the most poised passer there was.
Yeah.
That's just my personal opinion.
I had Stroud as my top quarterback going into the Combine, and the Combine just confirmed that for me. Obviously, I didn't get to see Young throw or do anything. Obviously, we were concerned about the height going in, and it became even worse after we got there. But he's been this height for most of his adult life. He's always played behind 6'4" linemen, so it's not like that's something new to him. So it's not super worrying, but in terms of being able to hold up and being able to not get balls batted down, it's going to be an issue. So we'll see where they go. I personally think a team's going to fall in love with Anthony Richardson and move up for him in the draft. I did a mock ride. The Colts moving up to 101 to get Richardson. Jim Irsay is a nut job, and he just might do it. He just might, I want to win now, and he thinks Shane Steichen can do it because he did it with Jalen Hurts. And they might do it. I have it Richardson 1 to the Colts. I have Stroud going to the Texans at 2, and then I have the Texans taking JSN later to pair those two back up. So they have 2 at 12 right now, and that's an easy get for them to do. So I'd be super happy with that combination.
I would be too, honestly. Just seeing them continue that pairing from college to NFL would just be absolutely awesome. Yeah. But I know we got a lot to get to. I know you want to talk about your risers and fallers, so let's get into it. For your quarterback, who was your riser going in?
Surprisingly, it's Stetson Bennett, like from Georgia. His press conference didn't go over great. Some people liked it. Some people thought that the character issues were glaringly evident. I wasn't at it. I was floating around doing some other ones, but some of the people I talked to didn't like it. But he's got some character issues, which teams don't care about that much. Like, they just want talent. He ran a 4.67 40, so he's not overly fast, but not slow. But he had the same ball speed as Anthony Richardson at 60 miles an hour, which just trailed Will Levis at 62. I think he had the best deep ball at the combine. Like, being there, people were just, wow, he did it. Now, he did look like he was giving it his all. Anthony Richardson, who looked really fluid and like almost like he wasn't even trying. I think Stetson Bennett went from probably not being drafted possibly being a second-round pick. It's weird because he could still go undrafted if the character issues are really a thing when he has meetings with teams, but his range of outcomes is now second round to not drafted, or was fifth round or not drafted. So he moved up a ton for me in draft boards.
Okay. So in terms of fantasy, I know there's big speculation if he goes undrafted or if he's a day 2 pick.
Yep.
Let's go both scenarios. If he's not drafted, he's pretty much not on the board whatsoever. But if he is a day 2 pick, where would you value him at in drafts?
If he's a day 2 pick, it depends where he lands. I think I'm putting him at end of the second, early third. I keep saying that I think teams should, if they have a veteran, draft Stetson Bennett inside Baker Mayfield to be the backup. I think Baker Mayfield's a great person for him to learn from, because Baker went into the pros with that attitude of, I'm a winner, I've done this, and has really, I think, humbled himself after being tossed around the league the past year. I think it's a good person for Stetson Bennett to learn from. So, like, right, if I'm Minnesota, sign Baker as my backup, draft Stetson Bennett, let Kirk play for a year. I think Kirk Cousins is another great person for him to learn from. So if he gets in the right situation with the right coaching tree, I could take him late second, but I think early third is really where I'd like to get him. If he's not drafted, I think he's off my board. I mean, he may sign somewhere as a unsigned free agent, but if he's not drafted, I'm not super high on him, and then I'd take him like the last pick of my rookie draft.
I agree. If he is a day 2, I agree with you. Late second, early third, although I prefer an early third. He'd be a steal there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I loved watching Stetson out of college. I came from an SEC school, so watching him play was awesome. But I definitely get the character issues, and I want to see what happens. I'm hoping some teams, like, he doesn't show that as much in interviews and he ends up getting taken, but we'll have to see. Would you say with him moving up that other guys have moved down, like Tooney and all them?
I think so. So I had it going in. I had it Stroud, Young, Levis, Richardson, and then it was a toss-up between Duggan, Hooker, and Stetson Bennett. And I think Hooker's still above Stetson Bennett, but I definitely think he beat out Max Duggan, which we'll talk about later. But I don't think any of those other guys were there, but I definitely think Stetson Bennett showed out enough where you're if you're willing to take a flyer on him, right? Even if you're someone like Arizona, who's got Kyler Murray for the next foreseeable future, kind of this year's just a waste, right? You might have Kyler for a few more years. Take that risk on Stetson Bennett. If you think the coach can mold him and shape him and give him a year or two, I think he needs 2 years, where I think someone like Richardson needs 1. But give me 2 years of Stetson Bennett sitting and learning from the right guys and the right coach and the right system. I think he could have a decent NFL career.
I agree with that. So now for your running back, this was somebody I didn't expect to hear, but let's hear who you got.
Chase Brown, running back for Illinois, just had an amazing combine. He was third fastest he was the third fastest of the 200 backs, so the bigger backs. He was 5th best overall. He was 3rd best in weight adjusted 40 for those big backs. He was 6th in his 10-yard split, so really good numbers there. He had the highest vert and the highest broad and the highest bench press. So the vert and the broad jump are really about lower body explosiveness. So when we're talking to big back, we want him to be able to hit those holes hard. We don't expect him to break off these massive runs, but we expect him to hit the hole hard, gain 5 yards, and then possibly, break through some tackles, break through those arm tackles. He really went from someone that wasn't talked about in that group, because obviously it's Bijan 1. Everyone just assumed Jahmyr Gibbs was 2. And then it was who's third? Is it Charbonnet? Is it Tank Bigsby? Is it, Sean Evans? Who is it? And all of a sudden, Chase Brown is in that conversation, even from someone that most people didn't even know, no one was talking about. So being in that consideration of maybe he's 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that group. I have him, I think, 5th or 6th right now, but originally he was like outside the top 10. So really like where he's being right now. Just a great combine. The perfect example of what a combine can do for someone. Takes you out of irrelevancy and puts you into the conversation of being I think we're going to see a run of running backs in the 2nd and 3rd round on day 2. I think he's going to be in that conversation. If you're looking for a big back, I think he's the second big back I want. I prefer Roschon Johnson a little bit just because of his leadership. But if you're looking for a big back to pair with your Austin Eckler, I think he's the guy.
I definitely agree with you. One of the things I noticed when I was watching Brown, granted I was watching like Brown, Kenny McIntosh, all those guys, because I think McIntosh and Brown are kind of similar in the fact that they're both big-bodied running backs.
Yep.
Brown, he hit the gaps when he was in drills. He showed that poise that you're looking for in a running back, whereas guys like Kenny McIntosh, he stumbled. When they were going through drills, he was stumbling. So seeing Brown be light on his feet for a heavier back was definitely something I was looking for.
And I'll say out of those 200-pound backs, everyone loves Zach Charbonnet. What I didn't like about Zach Charbonnet is when he was making his cuts, Zach Charbonnet seemed to get a little off center. So his top half bent over too far. So, right, it's fine if you're just cutting, there's no around you. But if you get hit, you're already leaning one way. If they hit you, you're down. Or they hit you low, you're out. But I felt like Chase Brown, some of those guys were pretty upright, pretty centered on a center line. So I'd love to do a video breakdown. I'm not great at cutting video, but just watching Charbonnet from the back just tilts a little more when he's cutting, and it just he looks a little off centered. So if you get hit, you're going to go down easier because you don't have that center of gravity. I liked Chase Brown's body control in those drills, which is really something I looked for. And I was like, oh, that's clearly different. He looked like he was cutting like Bijan. Bijan's the same way. Like Bijan looks smooth. There's not a lot of movement in his upper body compared to his lower body. It's all in line. Chase Brown was the same way for me.
I definitely agree. And one comment you made about this being primarily like a one running back in the first round, bunch in the 2nd and 3rd. I see this being a repeat of Jonathan Taylor's draft year. You had Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 1st and JT Dobbins, all those guys in the 2nd round. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that shapes up.
And I think that's going to mirror into Dynasty rookie drafts. I think we'll see probably 2 or 3 guys in the 1st round. We'll see, obviously, Bijan probably 101 or 102. Jahmyr Gibbs go around the 106. And then we'll probably see a guy sneak into the back half, who, depending on what you like, if you want a bigger back, you go with a Brown or a Charbonnet. If you want a smaller back, you go with the Devin and Chains. And then I think we'll see 2nd round just be filled with running backs and wide receivers. And we'll see just a ton of run of them. And then we'll finally see some quarterbacks come off end of the 2nd, early 3rd. And then we'll see another run of running backs. Because it's kind of a deep class. This whole draft is just very slim at the top, but very deep in the middle.
I definitely agree. I think you can use your 1st round pick, shore up your lines, because the lines are top heavy in the draft this year.
Yeah.
But you can get your skills on day 2, which I think is a steal, in my opinion.
I agree.
So now to move on to your wide receiver, you and I actually were in common on this one. So let's hear what you got for it.
I had Tank Dell. So Nathaniel Tank Dell from Houston. I really liked what I saw from him. He ran a 4.49 40. But he was 3rd in 10-yard splits at a 1.49. So didn't have great overall speed. 4.49 is not horrible. It's actually pretty good. But being 3rd at a 1.49 in his 10-yard split shows me he's got that explosive playability. He looked really smooth catching the ball. Didn't do any of the other. Didn't do vert or broad jump or any of those things. Didn't do 3-cone. He's got a smaller frame, which is concerning for his size. I think he's 5'8", 165. So he's okay. It's a smaller wide receiver class as is. I do expect most of the wide receiver class to pack on another 10 pounds. So if he'll get to 175, I'd still like to see him get to 180, 185. So if he can put on the weight, it definitely matters. Landing spot's going to matter for him, but just watching his smooth fluidness showed me that he has the potential to get there. At 5'8", I think that's a decent size. It's a little smaller than I want. I was hoping he'd be more 5'9", 5'10", but I think he's a perfect slot guy if he gets in the right landing spot.
He definitely gives me the Hunter Renfrow vibes. When he was at Clemson, he was primarily their slot guy. He was only 5'10", 185. So he definitely shows that characteristic. I agree. A landing spot is going to be ideal for him. He's going to need to be somewhere that uses the slot for him to get any playing time. as it stands right now, where did you have him in your boards, and where do you have him now?
I had him probably outside my top 10, maybe just in that 10 spot. I think he's still probably pretty low. He's probably 7 or 8, but right landing spot could vault him into 5, 6 for me. Like he's clearly behind the big three, and I think Zay Flowers. But like if he gets in the right spot, right, if he goes to New England, who uses that slot role, if he goes to even a team like Miami, who has 2 big receivers who are going to stretch the field and they could utilize someone underneath, I would like it. Now it's not part of their game plan as is, but he's got some fast beats. So like get him on those screens, get him in that Hunter Renfrow role. I would love, if Vegas Raiders can sign someone to do well, he could fill in that role when Hunter Renfrow was gone. Even someone like the Jets, they just cut Braxton Berrios, who's had a productive-ish career there from the slot. Like he goes to the Jets and the Jets get Aaron Rodgers. I'd love it. I'd be scooping up Tank Dell probably mid-second. I think right now, if before we know landing spots, he's probably an early third for me, but he could easily sneak up there. I think he's one of those players that we'll see a lot of hype of once he lands. If he lands in a good spot, he's one of those guys I think will start getting a lot of hype. He's just not right now because we just don't know, and he is smaller. So we'll see what happens there.
I definitely agree. I was on the road and I was talking with one of my buddies who was watching the combine. He was like, dude, you have to watch Tank Dell.
Yeah.
He's just killing it. So now we're going to move to a small school guy for your tight end. So let's hear who you got.
I have Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion. He's 6'7", 255, but also ran the second fastest 40 out of tight ends at a 4.55. So big dude running really fast. Tied for second in the 10-yard splits with a 1.57, which is the same as Darnell Washington. Now, Darnell Washington's getting all the buzz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kuntz was first or second in every other drill that they ran. Like, you pick a drill, he was either first or second. Went from outside my top 5 in tight ends to probably in it. Like, I think he's probably 4. Depends on how you feel about Darnell Washington. If you think he's going to be a blocker, obviously he's an athletic freak. But to see someone be first or second in pretty much every drill at the combine says, oh man, there's some skill there, especially at 6'7", 255. He looked good in the passing drills, didn't look great. Now, none of them really stood out because they're all really good. It's a really deep tight end class. He could be the next, big name. He could be, I know Tyler Higbee hasn't been great in the NFL, but he's been good. Kuntz could also be like a Dawson Knox, like a big guy who blocks, but also gets out there and is just a tough runner. Like 6'7", 255, you get him a ball like you do Dawson Knox, he's going to bowl over people. Obviously, small school in Old Dominion, didn't have the greatest college production, but I like what I saw from him. Again, it's like in these guys, fit matters, but the physical skills are there, and I liked what I saw from the passing stuff.
I definitely agree. I truly think this tight end class is going to reshape tight end rankings. I think we could see a lot of rookies hit the top 10s this year.
Yeah.
For example, Tyler Higbee, I think, was like tight end 7 or 8 this year. Yep. I could see him get bouncing out for one of these rookies, but landing spots is going to matter with them. Kuntz was definitely fun to watch. He is a little bit of an underdog coming from Old Dominion, but I'm definitely excited to see where he's going.
I agree. And so while we're talking tight ends, can we just go right to my tight end faller? Because I think
let's hear it. That's definitely a good one to talk about.
So I had Cameron Latu from Alabama as my faller. What I like about Kuntz is he has that chip in the shoulder coming from a small school in Old Dominion. Cameron Latu came from Alabama, so he has that Alabama pedigree. He didn't work out at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
He was 6'4", 242. In such a deep group, he didn't work out, so he couldn't stand out. But you expect Alabama guys to be something, right? Like, that's just what you expect. It's Alabama. They produce skill players left and right. If you list off, like, Alabama's players currently in the NFL, you can name, like, 20 of them pretty easily. Him not working out, he fell because Kuntz rose, Darnell Washington rose. A lot of these guys were, so him not doing anything really fell off. So he's going to have to put out a great combine. So I had him falling. I think he was borderline top 5 for me, and I think he might be outside the top 10 until we see something from him. I don't know what it is with the Alabama guys who just like, hey, we're not working on the combine, and they're just going to save it for pro day. But I think it's a huge mistake for him to not do anything. I don't think he's injured as far as I know. He might be. I don't keep that much tabs on that many tight ends in the rookies. But also 6'4", 242 is not overly big for a tight end. I mean, it's big for a person, right? I'm
Yeah.
6 foot. 6'4" is clearly big, but in a group where all those guys are 6'4" and up, it seems he just didn't do anything to stand out because he didn't do anything, and other guys really stood up. So he just fell just from doing nothing, which is always a bad thing at this time of year.
I definitely agree. I had Latu not in my top 4, but he
But
was
5 or 6, yeah.
5 to 6, somewhere like that. But with him not working out, he's definitely fallen for me. He's, like you said, outside of my top 10. My whole thing with the Alabama players definitely have that pedigree where they think, oh, I don't have to show up and show out.
Yeah.
But when you're in a position like Latu, like you said, you have to because you're competing in it's a difference of millions of dollars here for crying out loud.
And the problem is he's going to go to Alabama Pro Day, and everybody's going to be talking about Bryce Young. Like, no one's going to be talking about him. It's a little too late, I think, for him to really get the buzz. Now, right, teams don't care about buzz, but teams want to send their scout. But they're going to send a scout who's going to want to look at Bryce Young. They're not going to send a ton of scouts to look at Cameron Latu. Like, I think he missed his window to really impress most of the league. I get it. Everyone's going to be at Alabama Pro Day, and people might take notice, but it's not like he's doing tight end specific drills. At the combine, it was just tight ends. They're the only ones out there. It was the end of the day. Like, they had their moment to shine. He's going to go to Alabama Pro Day and be in a group with Bryce Young and all those other guys and be, I think, lost in the shuffle there.
I agree. Because at the Pro Day, they're going to be looking at Gibbs. They're going to be looking at Young. They're going to be looking at, like you said, anybody but Latu. So I think I'm probably not even touching him in drafts at this point.
And also, I'm pretty sure it's like Alabama Pro Day, then the next day is Ohio State, then the next day is Kentucky. So, like, as far as, like, news cycle goes, like, it's going to be on to the next thing, right? It's going to be on to Ohio State. It's going to be on to JSN. It's going to be on to Stroud. Then it's going to be on to Will Levis. Like, where does he fit into that news cycle? Where does he fit into, like, find his niche and have people talking about him? I think the Combine was that place because that's all people could talk about for a while, for half a day was tight ends.
I agree. So with that in mind, we're going to move to your quarterback pick, who I was a little surprised about, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
My faller for quarterbacks is Max Duggan, TCU quarterback. He ran a real good 40. It was the second fastest 40. Just watching it again, because I watched it again yesterday and a little bit today, his throws just seemed off. The placement just wasn't there in some of those passing drills, especially on the shorter throws. It just seems like either he was behind the guys or over the guy's head. It wasn't the right placement. I had him as possibly my QB5. I love his grittiness, his moxie, to go out there and run. I think he got passed by Stetson Bennett. I think he was probably behind Hendon Hooker, which I think he now firmly is. So if we had the big 4, then you have Hendon Hooker at 5. If Stetson Bennett moved up to 6, now Duggan's 7, and I think he actually got passed by Dorian Thompson-Robinson and possibly Tanner McGee, who didn't work out. So he's getting passed by guys who didn't do anything. That says a lot to me. Like, when you're like, hey, would you rather have Max Duggan or Tanner McGee? You're like, I think I might take Tanner McGee. Tanner McGee is like 6'4". He's got the physical, giftings of a prototypical quarterback where Max Duggan doesn't. Max Duggan needed a good combine. He got exposed against Georgia in the national championship playoffs, right? Everyone was talking about him. If he wins that game and doesn't look bad, he's talked about as a top 5 pick. He got exposed against a great defense. He needed to come out of the combine and excel, and he just did okay. I was impressed by his 40 time. It was slightly faster than I was expecting. Most people were expecting him to run a 4.6, and he ran a 4.5 something. A low 5.4s, I believe. Mm-hmm. I just didn't see enough from him in the passing drills. It just looked like his ball placement was just off, especially on those short passes, which is not what you want to see from a not-so-big quarterback who didn't have great college production. Had good, but not great college production.
I agree. Coming out of TCU, he's got a little bit of – the last good quarterback coming out of TCU was Trayvon Boykin, and we all know how that went.
Yeah, exactly.
So Duggan, I wasn't that high on personally. Like you said, he got absolutely demolished in the championship game. So I can't see him being worth anything right now, but he may shine at the Pro Day. Who knows?
I will say that, like, him and Stetson Bennett are an interesting case. If you give Stetson Bennett Max Duggan's personality, Stetson Bennett's a top 5 pick. If you give Max Duggan Stetson Bennett, winning pedigree, he's a top 10 pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because Max Duggan doesn't have that winning pedigree, he didn't do any right. They got blown out by Georgia. He looked bad. It's just going to be bad for him. Like, there's going to be a team that might fall in love with him for that moxie. And I said that going into it, like, he has the potential to go in there and just like wow people, and someone might take a shot on him, but he's not. He's never going to come in and be like, this is the guy we really love. Like, let's say he goes to Seattle, and Seattle's like, hey, it's an open competition between you and Gino, and somehow he wins that, which he wouldn't. But let's say somehow he does because Pete Carroll is just wonky and he'll take that guy. No one's going to be like, yeah, that's what we want. It's going to be like, oh, we're starting Max Duggan. Uh-oh. I think he's a 4th-round pick in your rookie drafts right now. I don't think he gets a starting job. I don't think he sniffs at a chance at a starting job. But I will say this, backup in the leagues play every year, and sometimes third-string guys. We saw with the Rams have to like bring guys off the street just to get by. So if Max Duggan's on a roster and he starts for fantasy, people are going to start him for fantasy. Like, if it's week 8 and we know Max Duggan is starting for a team, people are going to throw him in there because he does have that rushing upside, right? He could run in 2 touchdowns. He's like Taysom Hill on some level where it's like you just never know what you can get. And he'll have a good week, and then he'll have 2 or 3 bad weeks, and you'll be done with them, and then he'll start another week, and he'll be good. He's going to be super frustrating, but someone you might want to have on your rosters late. Throw him on your taxi squad, see what happens.
I agree. If I can get him in the late 4th, he'll sit on my taxi squads.
Yep.
Now let's go on to prior to the combine. He was, I think, my running back 4 or 5. So let's hear what you got.
I got Tank Bigsby from Auburn. I agree with you. He was 4 or 5 with me. He was talked like, can he be better than Charbonnet? But realistically, behind all the other big 200-pound backs, he was slower than them. He ran what his weight-adjusted 40 should have been. So weight-adjusted 40s, they take their height and weight and give you what their 40 should be, and theoretically, they should have been faster. Whatever he ran, hold on, let me pull up my sheet here. Bigsby ran a 4.56, which is what his weight-adjusted 40 should have been. So he was what his weight should be, which isn't great. Like, when you're talking, he's 6'2", 210. Roshan Johnson ran 0.04 faster. Charbonnet 0.06 faster. Generic Price, so Generic Price is what I've been calling him, 216, ran 0.21 faster than his weight adjusted 40. So Tank Bigsby to me is slow, like ploddingly slow.
I agree, and
he fell hard for me. And when you're talking a guy who could have been running back 3, is probably running back outside my top 10 now.
100% agreed, and that too that's pretty much our agreement when it comes to your wide receiver as well. What we were expecting and what we got was nowhere near. There was a big difference between the two.
And that's Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver out of Tennessee. Hyatt came into the press conference saying he was going to run a 4.3, was going to possibly break the record. There was kind of buzz about it. When he went up to run his 40, everybody's like, oh, here's Hyatt. Let's get ready. And we're all like edge of our seats waiting. And then he ran slow. His game was built on speed. He has a limited route tree in college. And so when your game is built on speed and then you run slower than what you said, right, you can't talk a big game and then not back it up. He's still fast, right? A 4.4 whatever is still fast. It's just when you say I'm going to run a 4.3, possibly break the record, okay, now it's disappointing. He didn't look great for me in a lot of the other passing drills. He just doesn't run a good route tree. So he's a Deshaun Jackson type where he just runs straight and you got to air the ball out to him. But even on those, I think he dropped a couple. I will give him the benefit of the doubt. He did not get balls from any of the top quarterbacks. He was getting balls from, all the bad guys in his group. He got the last one was the deep ball, the 9 route basically, and that was from Will Levis, and I think he dropped it. Like he dropped that. Like his one finally got a good pass on his route from a great quarterback, and he dropped it.
Yeah, that was
not good. And he's only 6 foot, and he's 176 pounds. So he's small for a 6 foot guy. Like he should be in the 190 pounds. He's going to have to pack on probably 20 pounds, which I think is pretty hard to do for him. I think it's going to be more like 10. He's going to be pretty slender, which I think is the big knock on him right now.
I agree. And going into this, I thought Hyatt was like the wide receiver version of guys like Mitchell Trubisky.
Yep.
Just the guys that only have like 1 year of solid production. Before that, it was next to nothing. Because I don't think he eclipsed 400 passing or receiving yards the year before.
Agreed.
So people were seeing him in the first round. I'm tough to see him go early day 2 now.
I think he's a late third, early fourth round pick in the NFL draft, and I think that's where he should be in your dynasty startup drafts, right? He's going to be a boom bust guy in the NFL, so that's what he's going to be for your fantasy team. Where best ball, maybe I scoop him up late. Like if best ball drafts, I think he's a perfect player because, right, if he gets a 70-yard touchdown, right, that's potential. But I don't, in a managed league, I don't want him because I don't want to have to run that risk of like, do I pay Jalen Hyatt and hope he gets this deep bomb? Like very much what Gabe Davis was 2 years ago, where it's like it's either nothing or he's going to get 3 catches for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't think he's as good as Gabe Davis. I think he's smaller. He's going to struggle against press coverage. He might do well in kick punt return, but his hands didn't look great to me either. So I wonder if he even does that.
I definitely agree with you. I was hoping he would do well, but didn't see it. Hopefully he rocks it at the pro day and just erases those fears. But if he doesn't, he's boomer bust.
Yeah, if he comes out and on his pro day and runs a 4.34 or something like that, like gets close to the record, I think people go, oh, he actually is fast. Now there'll be some obviously that discrepancy is going to matter, but people were expecting him to be fast, and he was not as fast as advertised. And he talked a big game, which I think is also put off a lot of people of like, man, you talked big game and you couldn't back it up. I'd much rather someone come out and go, yeah, I'm going to be fast. We'll see, and then surprise me. He talked a big game and then let us down.
I definitely agree with that. Well, hey, Dustin, it was great to have you on.
Yeah, it was great.
Great to talk about this. Anybody that's watching, you can come check us out at dynastyprosfootball.com. Come check out Dustin and I on Twitter. And you guys have a great night. Thanks for watching.
Awesome.
There, come on.